For 7 years, a noble prince turned away every royal proposal. Until one day, a fearless woman from the simplest of places challenged everything he thought he knew about love, loyalty, and leadership. What happened next would change not only his heart, but an entire kingdom. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and why you enjoy stories like this. I'd love to hear from you. In the towering stone walls of Cînutul Alb Castle, silence reigned like an unwelcome guest. The morning light filtered through stained glass windows, casting colorful shadows across the empty throne room where Prince Ilie Basarab sat alone, his handsome face etched with quiet contemplation. At 42, he carried himself with the dignity of his noble lineage. Yet there was something in his dark eyes that spoke of a deeper melancholy, a haunting emptiness that no amount of royal privilege could fill. "Your Highness," a voice interrupted his thoughts. Lord Costin, his chief advisor, approached with a familiar expression of diplomatic patience. "The envoy from Moldavia awaits your audience. Princess Elena's portrait has arrived for your consideration." Ilie's jaw tightened. Another princess, another portrait of a woman I do not know, painted to hide flaws and exaggerate virtues. "My prince, this marks the 7th royal proposal you've received this year alone. The council grows concerned. 5 years without even considering a match." "The council's concern is noted." Ilie cut him off, rising from his throne. Standing at his full height, he commanded attention without effort. His broad shoulders carried the weight of royal responsibility, but his eyes, those were the eyes of a man searching for something beyond the castle walls. "You may inform the envoy that I appreciate Moldavia's offer, but my answer remains unchanged." Lord Costin's disappointment was palpable. "Forgive my boldness, Your Highness, but a prince without an heir leaves his kingdom vulnerable. The people whisper." "Let them whisper," Ilie said, moving toward the arched windows overlooking the kingdom. "I would rather face their whispers than bind myself to a woman chosen merely for political convenience. They say you've grown arrogant, Your Highness. Others claim melancholy has poisoned your heart." A bitter smile crossed Ilie's face. Perhaps they're right. What Ilie couldn't explain, wouldn't explain, were the visions that had plagued him since his 35th birthday. A woman with midnight hair and eyes like amber flames, calling to him through a veil of mist. Sometimes she appeared in dreams, other times she manifested in waking moments when he gazed too long at the horizon. Never speaking, always beckoning. Later that afternoon, Ilie rode his chestnut stallion through the hidden passages of the castle gardens, seeking the solitude that had become his only comfort. He made his way to the secluded chapel where Father Mihai, one of the monastery monks from Sambata de Sus, waited. "These visions persist, Your Highness?" the elderly monk asked, his weathered hands folded within his robes. 7 years now, Ilie confirmed, kneeling before the modest altar. "Always the same woman. I see her standing at the edge of a forest clearing, surrounded by morning mist, her hand outstretched, calling me forward. But when I move toward her, she vanishes." Father Mihai's eyes softened with understanding. "The elders at the monastery believe this may be a divine message, my prince. Perhaps the soul of your destined one calls to you from a place you have yet to find. Or perhaps I'm losing my mind," Ilie countered, a rare vulnerability crossing his features. "What kind of king sees phantom women? What kind of ruler places visions above duty?" "A human one," the monk answered simply. "God speaks to us in mysterious ways, some through scripture, others through dreams and visions." Ilie ran his fingers through his dark hair, streaked prematurely with silver at the temples. "I've met princesses from every neighboring kingdom. Beautiful women, intelligent women. Yet none stir anything within me beyond political calculation. I feel nothing." "Because your heart awaits something authentic," Father Mihai suggested. "Something beyond royal protocols and arranged marriages." As twilight approached, Ilie stood on the highest tower of Cînutul Alb, watching as lanterns were lit throughout the city below. From this vantage point, the kingdom looked peaceful, prosperous. But rumors of border skirmishes with the kingdom of Valseni troubled him. Their prince, Dragomir, was known for his cruelty and ambition. "My lord," His captain of the guard approached, bowing deeply. "The reports from the northern villages have arrived." Ely accepted the sealed parchment, breaking the wax with his signet ring. As he read, his expression darkened. "Valsini soldiers spotted near the border again?" "Yes, Your Highness. Small groups, but growing bolder. They claim to be hunting bandits, but the villagers report harassment and stolen livestock." Ely folded the report, tucking it inside his cloak. "Double the patrols along the northern roads. I want our presence felt, but avoid confrontation if possible. Dragomir is looking for an excuse." That night, as candles burned low in his private chambers, the vision came again, stronger than ever before. The woman with midnight hair stood at the edge of a forest clearing, but this time blood stained her simple dress. Her eyes, fierce and proud, locked with his across the impossible distance. Ely awoke with a start, sweat cooling on his brow. The castle walls suddenly felt like a prison. For 7 years, he had dismissed these visions as mere dreams, perhaps the product of a lonely heart. But tonight felt different. Tonight felt like a warning. At dawn, he summoned his closest guards and advisors. "I will ride north today," he announced, to their visible surprise. "I wish to see the border conditions for myself." "Your Highness," Lord Costin protested, "sending more troops would be wiser. These are dangerous times to travel, especially for a prince who has spent too long behind castle walls." Ely finished the thought. "Perhaps that is precisely why I must go. Our people need to know their prince sees more than royal portraits and council meetings." As preparations were made, Ilias stood before his father's portrait in the Great Hall. King Radu had been beloved by his people, a warrior and diplomat who ruled with both wisdom and compassion. "What would you do, father?" he whispered. "How do you lead when your heart is divided between duty and something you cannot name?" The portrait, of course, offered no answer, but as Ely turned away, he felt a strange certainty settle over him. The journey north would change everything. The woman of his visions was calling more urgently now, and somehow, though it defied all logic, he knew she was real, and she needed him. Hours later, as Ely and his small contingent of royal guards rode through the castle gates, the people gathered to catch a glimpse of their reclusive prince. They saw a man of royal bearing, handsome despite the weight of solitude in his eyes. What they couldn't see was the invisible thread pulling him forward, toward a destiny that would rewrite the future of Tinutul Alb, and toward a woman who existed beyond the realm of dreams. A woman who would soon shatter every wall he had built around his heart. The autumn air carried a chill as Prince Ely and his small company rode north through the winding forest paths. 3 days of travel had brought them to the outermost reaches of Tinutul Alb, where the dense woodlands gradually gave way to rolling hills. Lead-gray clouds hung low in the sky, promising rain before nightfall. "We should reach the village of Kurtza by sunset, Your Highness," Captain Dragos said, pointing toward the distant hills. A veteran soldier with a weathered face and unwavering loyalty, he had served Ely's father before him. "The border with Valsini lies just beyond those ridges." Ilia nodded, his eyes scanning the landscape. Something felt different today, an inexplicable tension in the air that set his nerves on edge. The visions that haunted his sleep had grown more vivid last night, filling him with a sense of urgency he couldn't explain. "My prince." Dragos lowered his voice. "The men have spotted smoke beyond that eastern ridge. Too much for a campfire." Ely's hand moved instinctively to the hilt of his sword. "How far?" "Less than a mile. Could be bandits. Or Valseni scouts." Without hesitation, Ely directed his horse toward the east. "We'll investigate. Keep formation, but stay alert." As they crested the hill, the source of the smoke became clear, a small farmstead with its barn ablaze. But it was the scene unfolding in the clearing that froze Ely's blood. 5 soldiers bearing the crimson and black colors of Valsini surrounded a lone woman. Her dark hair whipped in the wind as she stood with her back against a large oak tree, a crude knife gripped in her bloodied hand. Despite the gash across her forehead and her torn clothing, she remained upright, her chin raised in defiance. "Come now, village witch," one soldier taunted, clearly the leader of the group. His sword gleamed as he stepped closer. Lord Dragomir rewards those who cooperate. Tell us where the others fled, and perhaps we'll be gentle." The woman spat at his feet. "I am no witch, and your lord is no better than a rabid dog. Return to your kennel and tell him Valsini's shadow will never fall over these lands." The soldier laughed, a cruel sound that echoed across the clearing. Brave words from someone about to... "Enough!" Ili's voice rang out as he urged his horse forward, his royal guards fanning out behind him. The insignia of Chinutul Alb's ruling house glinted on their armor, unmistakable even in the fading light. The Valsini soldiers turned, momentary surprise giving way to sneering contempt. "Well, well," their leader drawled. "The hermit prince himself, so far from his castle walls. What an unexpected honor." "You stand on Chinutul Alb's soil," Ili stated coldly, dismounting with fluid grace. "Harassing our people and burning their homes are acts of war." The soldier's smile never wavered. "We pursue enemies of Valsini. This woman harbors rebels." "I harbor no one but my son and our village's children," the woman shot back, her voice steady despite her injuries. "Your men slaughtered our livestock and demanded tribute we cannot pay." Something about her voice struck Ili like a physical blow. Though he had never heard it before this moment, it resonated within him like a forgotten melody. And when he fully beheld her face, those amber eyes burning with defiance, the proud set of her jaw, recognition thundered through him. It was her, the woman from his visions. The leader of the Valsini soldiers took her momentary distraction as an opportunity, lunging forward with his sword raised. Without thinking, Ili intercepted the blow with his own blade, the clash of steel ringing through the clearing. "Captain Dragos," Ili commanded, never taking his eyes off his opponent. "Ensure the lady's safety." What followed was chaos. The Valsini soldiers, though outnumbered, fought with the desperate ferocity of men who feared their prince's punishment more than death itself. Ili moved with precision honed from years of training, his sword finding its mark with deadly accuracy. "Behind you," the woman suddenly called out. Ili spun just in time to parry a blow meant for his back. The Valsini soldier who had attempted the cowardly strike now found himself impaled on the prince's blade. When the skirmish ended, 4 Valsini soldiers lay dead, with their leader captured and bound. Ili turned toward the woman, who now leaned heavily against the oak tree, her knife still clutched in her trembling hand. Blood trickled from her temple, and her breathing came in labored gasps. "You're injured," he said, approaching her slowly, as one might a wounded forest creature. "Please, allow us to help you." She regarded him with wary eyes, recognition absent from her gaze. To her, he was merely a nobleman who had intervened, not the man who had seen her face in dreams for 7 years. "I need no royal charity," she managed, though her voice had weakened. "My village will be protected," Ili promised. "You have my word as—" But before he could finish, her legs buckled. Ili moved with startling speed, catching her before she hit the ground. As he cradled her against his chest, her eyes fluttered open once more, meeting his with startling clarity. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Prince Ili Basarab of Chinutul Alb," he answered softly. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "How inconvenient," she murmured, before unconsciousness claimed her. Holding her in his arms felt both foreign and achingly familiar. The woman from his visions, now flesh and blood, weighed almost nothing, yet the impact of her presence threatened to bring him to his knees. "Your Highness?" Captain Dragos approached cautiously. "What would you have us do with the prisoner?" Ili tore his gaze from the woman's face. "Bind him securely. He returns with us to stand trial for his crimes." "And the woman?" "She comes with us as well. Her wounds need proper treatment." Ili carefully lifted her onto his horse, mounting behind her to support her unconscious form. "Send 2 men ahead to Kartsa village. Find out if she speaks the truth about children being hidden there." The Valsini leader, now bound and kneeling, laughed bitterly. "Prince Dragomir will consider this an act of war, taking his men prisoner." Ili fixed him with a cold stare. "Burning our farms and attacking our women were acts of war. I merely respond in kind." He turned to his captain. "Gag him. I've heard enough Valsini lies for one day." As they rode toward the village with their unexpected charges, Rain began to fall, gentle at first, then in sheets that washed the blood from the clearing. Ili felt the woman stir against him, feverish murmurs escaping her lips. "Hold on," he whispered, though he knew she couldn't hear him. "Just hold on." In the haze of semi-consciousness, she turned her face toward his chest, seeking warmth. Something protective and fierce awakened in him, an emotion so foreign yet so fundamental that it left him shaken. 7 years of visions had not prepared him for this moment, for the reality of her. This woman, whoever she was, had called to him across time and distance. And now, with her blood staining his royal cloak and her life hanging by a thread, Ili understood with perfect clarity that everything was about to change. The Hermit Prince had finally found what he had been waiting for, though the price of this meeting had been written in blood and fire, a fitting beginning for what was to come. The finest chamber of Tsinutul Alb Castle had been hastily prepared for their unexpected guest. Tapestries depicting ancient hunts adorned stone walls, while a fire roared in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across the ornate furnishings. For 3 days the woman had drifted between consciousness and fevered dreams, attended by the royal physician and skilled herbalists from the nearby monastery. Prince Ili had barely left her side, much to the court's bewilderment. Now he sat in a carved chair beside her bed, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest beneath the embroidered coverlet. In repose, with her dark hair spread across the pillows, she looked different from his visions, more vulnerable, yet somehow stronger. "Your Highness," the elderly physician approached, bowing slightly. "Her fever has broken. She should wake soon, with her faculties intact." "Thank you, Theodore. You've done well." "It is my honor to serve." The physician hesitated, the wound on her side. It was not from yesterday's attack. It's older, poorly healed. Ili's brow furrowed. "What are you saying?" "This woman has been fighting for some time, my prince, and without proper care." He bowed again and withdrew, leaving Ili alone with his thoughts and the mysterious woman. As if sensing his scrutiny, her eyelids fluttered. She woke with a startled gasp, immediately trying to sit upright. "Be still," Ili said gently. "Your wounds are not fully healed." Her amber eyes widened as she took in the luxurious surroundings, then narrowed upon landing on him. Recognition and wariness flickered across her features. "Where am I?" she demanded, her voice hoarse but firm. "Tsinutul Alb Castle. You've been under the royal physician's care for 3 days." She clutched the blanket tighter. 3 days? Horror spread across her face. "My son, the children from the village, are safe," Ili assured her. "Captain Dragos found them hidden in the old mill cellar, as the villagers said you instructed. They've been brought to the castle and are being well cared for." Some tension left her shoulders, but suspicion remained in her gaze. "And what does Prince Ili Basarab want in return for this hospitality?" The directness of her question caught him off guard. Most subjects approached him with deference bordering on reverence. This woman addressed him as an equal, perhaps even an adversary. "Your name would be a start," he replied with the hint of a smile. She sat straighter, wincing slightly at the movement. "Anna Daciana of Kertsa village, widow of Radu the blacksmith, who died fighting Valsini raiders 3 years past. Mother to Mircea, age 6. She delivered this information like a challenge. "Now, Your Highness, what do you want from me?" Ili leaned forward. "Why do you assume I want something?" "Princes always want something," Anna replied bluntly. "Power, land, loyalty, taxes. What price must I pay for my rescue?" Her words stung more than they should have. "Is it so difficult to believe I might simply wish to help a subject in need?" A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "Forgive my skepticism, Your Highness, but your subjects in the northern villages have been bleeding and dying for months while Valsini forces cross our borders with increasing boldness. Only now, when you've witnessed it firsthand, does it merit royal attention." Ili felt as if she had struck him. "You speak dangerously for someone addressing her prince. And you speak like someone who has never known hunger or fear," she countered, then immediately closed her eyes, as if regretting her words. When she reopened them, her gaze was carefully controlled. "I am grateful for your intervention in the clearing. My son would be orphaned if not for your timely arrival." but I must return to my village. In your condition, the physician advises at least another week of rest. Anna pushed aside the coverlet, revealing the simple white nightdress someone had dressed her in. Her cheeks flushed with indignation. Where are my clothes? Being mended, I imagine, Ely said, finding himself oddly flustered by her directness. I'll have suitable replacements brought. I don't want royal garments, she interrupted. I want my own clothes, and I want to leave. A knock at the door saved Ely from responding. Lord Coston entered, looking distinctly uncomfortable to find his prince in such close conversation with the mysterious commoner. Your Highness, the council awaits you. The Valsini prisoner has revealed concerning information. Elia nodded. Very well. He turned back to Anna. We will continue this conversation later. Please rest and regain your strength. You are not a prisoner here, but I ask that you remain until the physician declares you fit to travel. Anna's eyes flashed. The people of Kartsa need protection, and they shall have it, Ely promised. I've dispatched a contingent of royal guards to secure the village. He hesitated, then added softly, Your son has been asking for you. Perhaps seeing him would ease your mind. Something in Anna's expression softened slightly. You would allow this? He's not a prisoner either, Anna Daciana. He's a child who misses his mother. As Ely followed Lord Coston from the chamber, he signaled to a servant. Bring the boy Murcha to his mother, and ensure they have privacy and whatever comforts they require. In the council chamber, the atmosphere was tense. The captured Valsini soldier stood bound before the assembled advisors, his arrogance diminished by days in the castle dungeons. Speak, Ely commanded, taking his seat. The prisoner straightened. Prince Dragomir has claimed the northern territories as rightful Valsini land. Any who resist are rebels against his authority. Those lands have belonged to Tinutal Alb for generations, Lord Coston protested. The prisoner's smile was cold. Prince Dragomir disagrees. He has authorized his captains to persuade the inhabitants to accept their new ruler. By burning farms and threatening women? Ely's voice was dangerously quiet. By whatever means necessary, the soldier replied. The woman you saved. She has been particularly troublesome, organizing resistance, hiding those who refuse to pledge loyalty to Valsini. Ely's mind raced with this new information. How long has this been happening? The council members exchanged uncomfortable glances. Reports of Valsini aggression have reached us for some months, Your Highness, an elder counselor admitted, but they seemed isolated incidents, not organized invasion. And you didn't think to inform me? Ely's anger was palpable. We hope to resolve the matter diplomatically without troubling me with the suffering of my people? Ely stood abruptly. Have our border villages been paying tribute to Valsini under threat of violence while we debated pleasantries in this chamber? The silence was answer enough. Ely dismissed the prisoner and turned to his captain. Dragos, prepare our forces. I want a full assessment of Valsini's strength along our northern border. This could mean war, Your Highness, Lord Coston cautioned. It seems war has already begun, Ely replied grimly. I simply wasn't informed. Later that evening, Ely found himself drawn back to Anna's chamber. The door stood ajar, and what he witnessed made him pause. Anna sat on the edge of the bed, a small boy with unruly dark curls nestled in her arms. She was singing softly, an old folk melody about eagles soaring over mountain peaks. Her voice, though untrained, carried a haunting beauty that resonated through the stone corridor. Will we go home soon, Mama? The boy asked, when the song ended. Soon, my brave one, she promised, smoothing his hair. The prince has offered us protection. Is he a good prince? Innocent curiosity filled the child's voice. Anna hesitated. He helped us when we needed it most. That counts for something. Father always said a true leader protects his people, the boy said solemnly. Your father was a wise man. Anna's voice caught. And he would be so proud of how brave you've been. Elia stepped back, unwilling to intrude further on their private moment. Something in his chest ached at the simple truth in the child's words. A true leader protects his people. Yet he had failed these people, hidden behind castle walls while they suffered. Tomorrow he would speak with Anna again. Not as prince to subject, but as a man seeking understanding from a woman who had been forced to become a leader when those appointed by birth had failed in their duties. The woman from his visions had come to him not as a mystical guide, but as a harsh mirror reflecting uncomfortable truths, and Ili knew with sudden certainty that his life would never be the same. Dawn broke over Tanutul Alb Castle with a clarity that belied the turmoil within its walls. Prince Ili stood at the window of his private study, watching as the first golden rays illuminated the distant villages dotting the countryside. The reports he had spent the night reading lay scattered across his desk, detailed accounts of Valsini incursions that had been withheld from him for months. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," he commanded, not turning from the window. Captain Dragos stepped inside, his weathered face grave. "The scouts have returned from the northern villages, Your Highness. The situation is worse than we feared." Ili finally turned. "Tell me." "3 villages beyond Kartsa have been burned to the ground. The survivors have fled to the forests or neighboring settlements. Valsini soldiers have established outposts along what they're now calling their new border." Dragos hesitated. "There are accounts of villagers who resisted being publicly executed as examples." Ili's fist came down hard on the oak desk. "How did this happen without my knowledge?" "It appears certain council members felt these were regional disputes best handled locally." Dragos chose his words carefully. Lord Magnea in particular argued against alarming Your Highness with what he termed peasant conflicts. "Peasant conflicts," Ili repeated, his voice dangerously soft. "While my people are slaughtered." A second knock at the door revealed a young servant girl, trembling slightly under the prince's intense gaze. "Begging your pardon, Your Highness, but the woman, the one from the village, she's gone." "Gone? Explain yourself." "She and her son, my lord. The guards saw them leaving through the east gate at first light. She told them—" The girl swallowed nervously. "She told them you had granted permission for her return to Kurtza." Ili's jaw tightened. "And they believed this?" "She wore the royal seal, my lord, the one given to those under your protection. The guards assumed—" "That I would allow an injured woman and a child to ride unaccompanied into dangerous territory?" Ili shook his head in disbelief. "Have my horse prepared immediately. Captain, select 6 of your best men to accompany me." "You mean to follow her yourself?" Dragos asked, surprise evident in his voice. "I do. Your Highness, with respect, the council meeting. The council has kept me ignorant while my kingdom bleeds." Ili cut him off. "They can wait. Anna Daciana cannot." Within the hour, Ili and his small contingent galloped through the castle gates, following the eastern road toward Kartsa. The prince rode with a singular focus, his mind filled with images of the stubborn, injured woman and her solemn-eyed son. They caught up to her near midday, at a fork in the road where the main path continued east while a smaller trail branched northward toward the forest villages. Anna sat atop a sturdy brown mare, her son secured before her. She had donned simple traveling clothes, a homespun dress and woolen cloak that bore no resemblance to royal finery. She turned at the sound of approaching hooves, her expression hardening when she recognized the prince. "You lied to my guards," Ili stated as he reined his horse alongside hers. "And you had me watched," she countered. "It seems we are both disappointed." Despite everything, Ili found himself fighting a smile at her audacity. "You're not fully healed. The journey could reopen your wounds." "My people have wounds that have gone untended far longer than mine, Your Highness." Her amber eyes held his without wavering. "I appreciate your hospitality, but my place is with them." The boy, Mircea, stared up at Ili with undisguised curiosity. "Are you really the prince?" he asked suddenly. "I am," Ili replied, softening his tone for the child. "Then why didn't you help us before? Papa said princes protect people." Anna's sharp intake of breath was audible. "Mircea, mind your manners." But Ilie raised his hand. "No, the boy asks a fair question." He looked directly into the child's eyes, finding them unnervingly, like his mother's in their directness. I didn't know your village needed help. I should have, but I didn't. That was my failure. Mircea considered this with the serious contemplation only children can muster. Are you going to help now? I am, Ili promised, then shifted his gaze to Anna. If your mother will allow it. Something indefinable passed through Anna's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or reluctant respect. We don't need a royal escort, she said, though her tone had lost some of its edge. Consider it a royal visit, then, Ili suggested. I wish to see these northern villages with my own eyes, not through the filtered reports of my advisors. Anna studied him for a long moment. Very well, she finally conceded. But understand this, Your Highness. The people you'll meet have suffered greatly. They won't bow and scrape for a prince who's been absent during their darkest hours. I don't expect them to, Ili replied quietly. They rode in silence for a time, the road growing rougher as they traveled north. The fertile farmlands near the castle gradually gave way to more rugged terrain, where humble cottages clustered around village commons. The soil is poorer here, Ili observed, yet the royal tax remains the same as in the valley regions. Anna glanced at him sideways. You begin to understand. As they crested a hill, the village of Kartsa came into view. Ilie had expected damage from Valkani raids, but the reality shocked him. Nearly half the homes stood as charred ruins. The fields lay trampled and untended. In the village center, people moved like shadows, thin, wary figures who paused in their work to stare as the royal party approached. An elderly man with a wooden leg stepped forward, his weathered face breaking into a smile when he recognized Anna. Praise be you've returned, he cried. The children said royal guards took you. They did, Batranul Petru. This is Prince Ili Basarab, Anna replied, dismounting carefully and settling Mircea on the ground beside her. The boy immediately ran to an older woman who embraced him with tears in her eyes. The old man regarded Ili with undisguised surprise. We haven't seen royal colors in Kartsa for many seasons, Your Highness. A mistake I intend to remedy, Ili replied, dismounting as well. I've come to see for myself what Valsani has done to my people. Batranul Petru's gaze hardened. And what will you see? Empty grain stores, graves of those who resisted, children who start at every sound, fearing soldiers' boots? Petru, Anna cautioned, the prince saved my life in the forest. He deserves our courtesy, if not our trust. The old man nodded reluctantly. Forgive an old soldier's bluntness, Your Highness. If you truly wish to see, then see. Anna will show you. As the villagers slowly gathered, Ilie was struck by their dignity amid such devastation. They bowed. Custom ran too deep for them to do otherwise, but their eyes held questions, accusations, and a desperate, fragile hope that he found more humbling than any formal ceremony. Anna moved among them with easy authority, checking on a young mother's infant, consulting with the village blacksmith about repairs, promising a young girl that, yes, they would rebuild the small school before winter came. They look to you, Ili observed quietly when she rejoined him. Not to the magistrate I appointed. Magistrate Bogdan fled at the first sign of Valsani raiders. Anna replied without rancor. Someone had to decide where to hide the grain, how to defend what little we had left. She led him through the village, showing him with unflinching honesty the reality his people faced. The burned meeting hall where village elders had refused to sign Valsani loyalty oaths, the shallow graves of those who had resisted, the hidden cellar where children had huddled in darkness, while soldiers searched above. By sunset, Ilia's heart was heavy with a shame he had never known. In the small cottage that served as Anna's home, now partially rebuilt after being burned, he sat at her rough-hewn table while she prepared a simple meal. Why did no one send word to the castle? He finally asked. Anna placed a bowl of modest stew before him. We did. Many times. Messengers who never returned. Letters that received no answer. Someone intercepted them, Ili realized aloud. Or someone decided peasant problems weren't worth a prince's attention. She took a seat across from him. Eat, Your Highness. It's not royal fare, but it will sustain you. Ely took a spoonful, surprised by the rich flavor despite the simple ingredients. In the corner, Mircea had fallen asleep on a small pallet, exhausted by the day's journey. "You've done well by these people," Ely said softly. "Better than I have." Anna's expression softened slightly. "They are my family. All I have left since Radu died. We protect our own here." "Teach me," Ilya said suddenly. When Anna looked startled, he continued. "Teach me what they need, what I've failed to see. I cannot undo what's happened, but I can ensure it never happens again." For the first time, Anna truly studied him, not as a prince, but as a man. What she saw must have satisfied her, for she nodded slowly. "Tomorrow," she said. "Tomorrow I will show you the truth of the North villages, Your Highness. Tonight you should rest. The truths of Kiertsa are enough for one day." As darkness settled over the village, Prince Ely Basarab found himself lying awake on a humble straw mattress in what had once been the village headman's home. Through the small window, he could see stars brighter than they ever appeared from his castle tower. The woman of his visions slept beneath the same stars, just a few cottages away. She had come into his life not as a mystical guide or romantic fantasy, but as a harsh mirror reflecting his greatest failure as a ruler. And for that, he realized with growing certainty, he would forever be in her debt. Dawn arrived with a cold mist clinging to the thatched roofs of Kiertsa. Prince Ely woke to unfamiliar sounds: a rooster's crow, the creaking of well pulleys, women's voices calling to one another as the village stirred to life. He dressed simply, foregoing his royal insignia for a plain cloak that Captain Dragos had brought. When he stepped outside, Anna was already waiting, her dark hair braided severely away from her face. She wore practical clothing, sturdy boots, a homespun dress, and a leather vest that had likely belonged to her late husband. "You look almost common, Your Highness," she remarked, a hint of amusement in her amber eyes. "Almost?" Ely asked, matching her tone. "You still stand like someone who's never had to bend his back in a field." She handed him a chunk of bread and a small wedge of cheese. "Break your fast quickly. We have much ground to cover today." As they walked through the village, Ely noticed how the people acknowledged Anna, not with bows or formal greetings, but with the easy familiarity of true respect. Children ran to her with small treasures they had found. Elders touched her arm as she passed, silently conveying their trust. "Where is your son today?" Ely asked. "With Patranul Petru. The old soldier has become a grandfather to him." A shadow crossed her face. "Mircea needs male guidance. I can teach him many things, but not how to be a man." They reached the edge of the village, where a group of men and women had gathered with tools and timber. "We rebuild the eastern homes today," Anna explained. "Those willing to work share in what we harvest." A broad-shouldered man approached, eyeing Ely suspiciously. "This is him, then? The prince who finally noticed us?" "Nikolai," Anna cautioned, "Prince Ely saved my life in the forest. He deserves our respect." "Respect is earned," Nikolai countered, then addressed Ely directly. "My wife and daughter died when Valsini torched our home. Where were your soldiers then, Your Highness?" Ely met the man's gaze unflinchingly. "There is no answer I can give that would ease your loss. My soldiers should have been here. I should have known. The failure is mine." Nikolai seemed taken aback by the direct admission. He studied Ely for a long moment before offering a curt nod. "At least you don't hide behind excuses. Anna says you want to help. Can you swing a hammer?" "I can learn," Ely replied. For the next hour, Prince Ely Basarab worked alongside the villagers, his hands growing blistered as he helped raise the frame of a new cottage. The labor was harder than any training exercise he had ever undertaken, yet he found an unexpected satisfaction in it. "You're stronger than you look," Nikolai commented grudgingly as they paused for water. Anna approached, wiping sweat from her brow. "The border patrol has returned. Valsini soldiers were spotted near Lunca Bradului." She turned to Ely. "That's the village due north of here. If you truly want to understand what we face, you should see it." They rode north with a small group: Ely, Anna, Captain Dragos, and 2 village hunters who knew the forest paths. The landscape grew more rugged, with dense pine forests giving way to rocky outcroppings. This was once good hunting ground, Anna explained as they followed a narrow trail. Now it's too dangerous to venture far from the villages. The deer and boar have grown scarce anyway, added one of the hunters, a silent man named Vlad. Valsini soldiers hunt them for sport, leaving carcasses to rot. As they neared Lunca Bradului, a putrid smell reached them. Rounding a bend in the trail, the source became clear, the charred remains of what had once been a prosperous village. Unlike Kartsa, no one had returned to rebuild. Bodies still lay where they had fallen, now picked clean by scavengers. Ili dismounted, his face ashen. "When did this happen?" "3 weeks ago," Anna replied, her voice flat. "A messenger reached us the day before I encountered you in the forest. I was searching for survivors when Valsani soldiers found me." Ili walked among the ruins, his boots crunching on charred debris. In what had once been the village square, he found a wooden post with a notice nailed to it. The parchment, weathered but still legible, bore Prince Dragomir's seal. "By order of His Highness Prince Dragomir of Valsini," Ili read aloud, "these lands are reclaimed for the glory of the rightful kingdom. Those who resist the natural order shall be deemed traitors and treated accordingly." "They call it reclamation," Anna said bitterly, "as if these lands were ever theirs to claim." Captain Dragos knelt beside a body, examining something clutched in the skeletal fingers. "Your Highness," he called, his voice grave. He held up a small wooden pendant carved with the crest of Tinutul Alb. "One of our royal messengers," Ili realized, taking the pendant. They intercepted him before he could reach the castle. Anna's expression remained carefully controlled. "Now do you understand? This isn't a border dispute or peasant conflict. This is systematic conquest." They buried what remains they could find, working in grim silence until the task was complete. As they prepared to depart, Ili noticed Anna standing alone by a small cairn of stones, her head bowed. "Did you know them well?" he asked softly, approaching her. "The headman was my cousin's husband," she replied without looking up. Their daughter was to be married next spring. Finally she turned to face him, her eyes dry but filled with a pain that went beyond tears. "This is what awaits Kartsa if Valtini continues unchallenged." Ilya reached for her hand, surprised when she didn't pull away. "It won't happen," he promised. "I swear it on my father's memory." "Words," Anna said, finally withdrawing her hand. "We've heard many words, Your Highness. What we need are actions." They made camp that night in a secluded clearing, far enough from Lunca Bradului to escape its ghosts. While the others slept, Ili found Anna sitting beside the small fire, her face illuminated by its flickering light. "You should rest," he said, sitting beside her. "Sleep doesn't come easily anymore." She stared into the flames. "Not since Radu died." "How did you meet him?" Ili asked, sensing she needed to speak of happier times. A small smile touched her lips. "I was gathering herbs in the forest. He was hunting. I thought he was a bear and nearly put an arrow through him." Her smile faded. "He was a good man, simple and honest. When Valsini raiders first came, he organized the village defense and fell defending his home," Ili finished quietly. Anna nodded. "Along with 12 others. We buried them beneath the old oak in the village center." She turned to look at him directly. "Your royal council sent condolences and promises of protection. Nothing came of it." "The council will answer for their deception," Ili assured her. "But first, we must secure these villages." "How?" Anna challenged. "Your soldiers are spread thin along the border. Valsini forces grow bolder each day." Ili was silent for a moment, considering. "Tell me about the land north of Kiertsa. You know it better than any royal scout." Anna's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "There's a valley 2 days' ride northeast, bordered by forests too dense for heavy cavalry. The locals call it Malashtina Corbilor, the Raven's Marsh." "A marsh?" "Not truly. The soil is firm most places, but after heavy rain—" She gestured with her hands. "It becomes a quagmire. Local hunters know which paths remain solid, but outsiders would find themselves trapped." Ili leaned forward, intrigued. "Could we lead Valsani forces there?" "Perhaps. Anna studied him with new interest. But it would require bait they couldn't resist. A small, seemingly vulnerable contingent of Tinutul Alb soldiers, Elia proposed, appearing to guard something valuable. For the first time, Anna looked at him not as a sheltered prince, but as a potential ally. It could work, but it would be dangerous. War is dangerous, Elia replied simply. But a trap that plays on their arrogance might spare many lives on both sides. They talked long into the night, the tactical discussion gradually giving way to more personal exchanges. Elia spoke of his isolation in the castle, the weight of a crown he had never wanted. Anna shared stories of village life before the raids, harvest festivals, winter dances, the simple joys of a community united. When dawn came, they rode back to Kurza with purpose. The plan they had crafted was bold and fraught with risk, but for the first time in months, Anna allowed herself to feel something close to hope. As they approached the village, she glanced at the man riding beside her, no longer just a prince in her eyes, but a potential champion for her people. The thought was both comforting and unsettling. Your people will need more than one victory to trust the crown again, she warned him. I don't seek their trust for the crown, Elia replied, meeting her gaze. I seek it for myself. Something unspoken passed between them in that moment, an understanding that transcended their vastly different stations. Whatever came next, they would face it not as prince and subject, but as equals united by a common cause. And for Anna Daciana, who had learned to trust nothing beyond her own strength, that realization was both terrifying and strangely liberating. The great hall of Tinutul Alb Castle hummed with tension. Ornate tapestries depicting ancient victories adorned stone walls that had witnessed centuries of royal councils, yet seldom had they contained such open conflict. Prince Elia stood at the head of the long oak table, his posture rigid as he faced the assembled council members. Beside him, much to the noble's visible discomfort, stood Anna Daciana in simple village attire. This is unprecedented, Lord Minea declared, his jeweled fingers drumming against the polished wood. A commoner attending royal council, and a woman no less. Anna Daciana speaks for the northern villages, Elia replied evenly. As we discuss their fate, her voice will be heard. Lord Coston, ever the diplomat, cleared his throat. Your Highness, while we appreciate your newfound concern for the border regions, perhaps traditional protocols would better serve. Traditional protocols, Elia interrupted, have failed these people for months. Messengers intercepted, reports altered or discarded. Tell me, Lord Coston, who gave orders to withhold information about Valsini aggression from your prince? A heavy silence fell over the chamber. Anna watched the council members exchange guarded glances, their discomfort palpable. Finally, Lord Minea spoke. The matters were deemed regional concerns, not worthy of troubling your Highness when diplomatic solutions seemed possible. Diplomatic solutions? Anna's voice cut through the hall, sharper than any blade. Is that what you call the graves at Lunca Bradului? The children orphaned in Kurza? Mind your place, woman, another counselor warned. Her place, Elia said coldly, is exactly where she stands. While this council played politics, Anna Daciana organized village defenses, protected children, and faced Valsini soldiers with nothing but courage and a hunting knife. He unrolled a map across the table, weighted at the corners with silver candlesticks. Now we discuss our response to Prince Dragomir's aggression, not with empty diplomatic gestures, but with action. For the next hour, Elia outlined the plan he and Anna had devised. A force of royal guards, seemingly escorting a valuable shipment, would travel the northern road. Meanwhile, village hunters would prepare hidden paths through the Raven's Marsh. When Valsini forces attacked, as they inevitably would, they would be led into terrain where their superior numbers became a disadvantage. This plan risks open war with Valsini, Lord Coston cautioned. We are already at war, Anna replied. The only difference is that now your prince knows it. An elderly counselor with a long white beard leaned forward. And if this commoner's trap fails? If our men are slaughtered in this marsh? Then I will answer for it, Elia stated. I will lead the contingent myself. The declaration sent shockwaves through the council. Nobles rose from their seats, voices overlapping in protest. Your Highness cannot risk himself in such a venture. The succession. If you fall, Chinutul Alb falls. Anna remained silent, studying Ili's face. She had not expected this. In their planning, she had assumed he would direct from the safety of the castle, not place himself in the path of danger. Ili raised his hand, and gradually the protest subsided. I will not ask my men to face risks I am unwilling to share. The decision is made. As the council reluctantly began discussing logistics, Lord Mehnea approached Anna, speaking low enough that only she could hear. You have the prince's ear now, peasant. But remember your station. When this infatuation passes, as it surely will, those who encouraged his recklessness will find themselves swiftly forgotten. Anna met his gaze without flinching. Is it reckless to defend one's people, my lord, or merely unfamiliar to those who have never tried it? The nobleman's face darkened, but he retreated without further comment. When the council finally adjourned, Ili led Anna through a side passage to a small courtyard garden, away from the stifling atmosphere of the great hall. You didn't tell me you planned to lead the mission yourself, she said once they were alone. Ili leaned against a stone balustrade, the weight of his decision evident in his posture. It wasn't my intention until I faced the council. Then why? Because I saw the truth in their eyes. He looked up at the evening sky, where the first stars were appearing. They don't believe in this plan. They don't believe in the worth of these villages. If I remain safely behind castle walls while sending others to fight, I prove them right. Anna studied him, trying to reconcile this man with the distant prince she had imagined for so long. It's a needless risk. Is it? Ili turned to face her. My father rode with his men in every significant battle of his reign. He believed a prince who asks others to bleed for him while remaining unscarred himself is no true leader. He paused. Was that not your criticism of me and Kurtza? That I lived protected behind walls while my people suffered? I did not expect you to swing to the opposite extreme, Anna replied, though her tone had softened. Your death would help no one. Nor do I intend to die, Ili said with the hint of a smile. I'm rather counting on your knowledge of the marsh to prevent that outcome. Despite herself, Anna felt the corner of her mouth twitch upward. The great prince trusting a peasant woman with his royal hide? The council would be scandalized. The council has much to answer for, Ili replied, his expression growing serious again. When this immediate threat is addressed, there will be changes in Chinutul Alb. No more will villages like Kertza be forgotten. Anna wanted to believe him, but experience had taught her caution. Words come easily in gardens at dusk, Your Highness. Let us see what dawn brings. They were interrupted by the arrival of Captain Dragos, who approached with a formal bow. The preparations are underway, Your Highness. We can depart at first light if that meets your approval. It does, Ili confirmed. Ensure the men selected understand the delicate nature of our strategy. We need discipline above all. After the captain departed, Ili turned back to Anna. There's something I've been meaning to ask you. Yes? The royal physician mentioned your wounds, the older ones. He said you've been fighting for some time. Anna's expression closed like a shutter. We all bear scars, Your Highness. Some are simply more visible than others. Anna, he said softly, using her name without title for the first time. If we are to trust each other with our lives, perhaps we might begin with our truths. She was silent for so long that Ili thought she would refuse. Then, slowly, she pushed up the sleeve of her dress, revealing a jagged scar that ran from wrist to elbow. The first Valsini raid, she explained, her voice distant. They came for grain. Radu organized resistance. I fought beside him. Her fingers traced the scar absently. A soldier's sword. I killed him afterward. Ili did not flinch from her words or the calm way she delivered them. And after Radu fell, someone had to continue. The magistrate you appointed fled. The village elders were too cautious, too willing to pay tribute in hopes of being left alone. Her eyes met his, unapologetic. I had a son to protect, a promise to keep. What promise? to my husband as he died, that I would not let them take our home." She pulled her sleeve down, concealing the scar once more. "Now I've shared a truth, Your Highness. Will you match it with one of your own?" The request took Ely by surprise, but he found himself nodding. "What would you know? Why did you never marry? A prince of your age. It's unusual." Of all the questions she might have asked, this was perhaps the most unexpected. Ely turned away, gazing out over the darkening garden. The council arranged many matches. Princesses from neighboring kingdoms, noblewomen with impeccable lineages. I met them, dined with them, danced at balls held in their honor. He paused, and felt nothing. No connection, no spark of recognition. "Many marriages begin that way," Anna observed. "Affection grows with time." "Perhaps." Ely hesitated, then decided to risk the full truth. "But for the past 7 years, I've been haunted, I suppose is the word. Visions of a woman I'd never met. A face in dreams that felt more real than any princess presented to me in gilded halls." He glanced at her, gauging her reaction. "When I found you in that forest clearing, fighting against impossible odds, I recognized you immediately. The woman from my visions, standing before me in flesh and blood." Anna stared at him, her expression unreadable. "You expect me to believe this?" "I expect nothing," Ely replied honestly. "I merely offer the truth you asked for, strange as it may sound." "So you saved me because of a dream?" Her voice held more confusion than skepticism. "I saved you because it was right," Ely corrected her. "The vision simply helped me recognize what was at stake." He smiled faintly. "Though I admit in my dreams you weren't quite so argumentative." The unexpected jest broke the tension. Anna let out a short laugh, surprising them both. "And in my imaginings of the crown prince, he wasn't quite so willing to get his hands dirty rebuilding cottages." A servant appeared at the garden entrance, announcing that dinner awaited the prince in the royal dining hall. "Will you join me?" Ely asked Anna. She shook her head. "I should check on Mircea, and I think your council has endured enough scandal for one day." As they parted ways, Ely caught her hand briefly. "Tomorrow we risk much. But know this, whatever comes, the northern villages will no longer stand alone." Anna's amber eyes held his for a long moment. "See that you keep that promise, Prince Ely, for all our sakes." Later that night, as Anna sat beside her sleeping son in the castle's guest quarters, she found herself reflecting on the prince's confession. Visions of a woman he'd never met, her own face appearing to him across years of dreams. Such things belonged to the realm of superstition and old women's tales. And yet, she remembered the moment in the forest clearing when their eyes had first met, the strange jolt of recognition she had felt, even as consciousness faded from loss of blood. She had dismissed it then as delirium. Now she wasn't so certain. Bitter winds swept across the northern plains of Ținutul Alb, carrying the first bite of winter and the acrid scent of smoke. On a ridge overlooking what remained of the village of Albești, Prince Ely sat astride his war-horse, his gaze fixed on the smoldering ruins below. Beside him, Anna pulled her woolen cloak tighter against the cold, her face a mask of contained fury. "We're too late," she said quietly. Again. The trap they had so carefully planned, the strategy that had seemed so promising in the safety of the castle, had failed. Valseni forces had not taken the bait of the royal convoy. Instead, they had struck elsewhere, burning 3 villages in a single night of coordinated attacks. "They knew," Captain Dragos said grimly, riding up to join them. "Someone warned them of our plan." Ely's jaw tightened. The betrayal was not unexpected, yet the knowledge cut deep nonetheless. "Search for survivors," he ordered. "We make camp here tonight." As royal guards fanned out across the ruins, Anna dismounted and walked toward what had once been the village well. A small group of survivors huddled nearby, mostly elderly and children, their faces hollow with shock and hunger. Ely followed, watching as she knelt beside a young girl with tangled hair and soot-streaked cheeks. With gentle hands, Anna wrapped her own cloak around the child's shoulders, speaking soft words of comfort that the prince couldn't hear. The intimacy of the gesture made him feel like an intruder. "Your Highness," an old woman called out, her voice cracking with age and despair. "Have you come to save us after we are already destroyed?" There was no accusation in her tone, only a bone-deep weariness that struck Ili harder than any reproach. Before he could respond, Anna spoke. "He's come to fight," she said firmly, "and so have I." That night, around campfires that did little to dispel the chill, Ili held council with his captains and the village elders who had survived. Maps were spread on flat stones, marked with the locations of recent attacks and rumored Valseni encampments. "They move like shadows," one elder said, tracing gnarled fingers along the map's northern edge. "No pitched battles, no formal declarations, just fire in the night and steel against the unprepared." Anna sat slightly apart, listening intently. When she finally spoke, all eyes turned to her. "They use our fear against us," she observed. "They strike where we're weakest, avoid where we're strong. Dragomir is many things, but not a fool." "What would you suggest?" Ili asked, aware of the sidelong glances his deference to her prompted among his men. Anna moved forward, kneeling beside the map. "Stop treating this as a traditional war. It's not armies meeting on open fields. It's terror, meant to break our will before the real invasion begins." She placed a stone on the map, marking the position of Valseni's main force as reported by scouts. "Dragomir remains here, behind his own borders, sending raiding parties to weaken us. He wants us desperate, divided, ready to accept his rule as preferable to constant fear." Captain Dragos frowned. "What you describe is not honorable warfare." "Honor?" Anna's laugh was sharp enough to cut. "Ask these people how much honor matters when your children are starving and your homes are ash." "Enough," Ili intervened, seeing the tension rising. "Anna speaks truth. We cannot fight this enemy with traditional tactics." He studied the map thoughtfully. "If we cannot lure them into a trap, perhaps we must take the fight to them." "An attack on Valseni itself?" Dragos sounded shocked. "Your Highness, our forces are stretched thin defending what remains of the border villages." "Not an army," Ili clarified. "A small force. Elite warriors who can move as they do, strike as they do." Anna's eyes met his across the firelight. "You're proposing a raid into enemy territory." "I am," Ili confirmed, "to send Dragomir a message that two can play at this game of terror." Later, as the camp settled into uneasy sleep, Ili found Anna standing alone at the edge of the firelight, her gaze fixed on the distant forests that marked the border with Valseni. "You disagree with the plan," he stated, coming to stand beside her. "I understand its purpose," she replied after a moment. "But it changes nothing for these people. Even if you burn Dragomir's villages, ours remain vulnerable." Ili was silent for a long moment, weighing her words. "What would you have me do, Anna? Tell me plainly without concern for my rank or pride." She turned to face him fully, the firelight casting half her face in shadow. "Return to the castle." Of all the responses he had anticipated, this was not among them. "You wish me to retreat?" "I wish you to use the power you actually have," Anna said, her voice low and intense. "These raids continue because Dragomir believes he can act without consequences. While you're here in the field trying to be a common soldier, the full might of Tinutul Alb remains unleashed. You think I should call the banners, summon the full army?" "I think you should be a prince," Anna replied bluntly. "Make formal alliance with Moldavia against the Valseni threat. Use the royal treasury to hire mercenary companies. Call upon the noble houses to fulfill their oaths of military service." Her words struck him with the force of revelation. In his determination to see the suffering firsthand, to fight alongside those affected, he had perhaps neglected the most powerful weapons at his disposal. "You're right," he admitted, surprising them both with his ready agreement. Anna's expression softened slightly. "There's more at stake now than when we began. Dragomir's ambition grows with each successful raid. If left unchecked, Tinutul Alb itself could fall." Ili finished grimly. "I will return to the castle tomorrow. Captain Dragos can continue the relief efforts here." "And what of me?" Anna asked quietly. What role would you have me play in this war? Elia studied her face in the flickering light, seeing the strength and determination that had first drawn him to her. Come with me, he said simply. Be my voice for these people in the royal council. Ensure they cannot be forgotten or dismissed again. Anna's surprise was evident. You would bring a village widow into the highest councils of your kingdom? I would bring a leader who has earned her people's trust, Eli corrected, and who has earned mine as well. Something unspoken passed between them in that moment, a recognition that transcended their vastly different stations. For a heartbeat, Eli was tempted to reach for her hand, to bridge the physical distance as they had begun to bridge the social one. The moment was shattered by a child's cry. Mircea, who had been sleeping near one of the wagons, called out in the grip of a nightmare. Anna moved immediately toward her son, leaving Eli alone with his thoughts. Dawn broke gray and cheerless over the ruined village. As preparations for departure began, a rider approached at speed from the east, bearing the royal insignia. The messenger dismounted with haste, his horse lathered with exertion. "Your Highness," he gasped, dropping to one knee before Eli. "Urgent news from the castle." Eli accepted the sealed parchment, breaking it open with growing dread. As he read, his expression hardened into something Anna had never seen before, a cold fury that transformed his handsome features. "What is it?" she asked, approaching with Mircea's hand clasped firmly in hers. "Prince Dragomir has sent an emissary to Ținutul Alb," Eli replied, his voice dangerously quiet. "He proposes a solution to our border disputes." "What solution?" Eli's eyes met hers, dark with controlled rage. "Marriage, between himself and a noblewoman of Ținutul Alb, to unite our kingdoms in peaceful accord." Anna frowned. "A political marriage is not unusual to seal peace. Why does this particular offer anger you?" "Because," Eli said, crumpling the parchment in his fist, "the bride he specifically requests is the northern widow who has the prince's ear. He demands you, Anna Daciana, claiming you as the price of peace." Shock rendered Anna momentarily speechless. When she finally found her voice, it was steady despite the pallor that had claimed her face. "He cannot possibly believe you would agree to such terms." "No," Eli agreed grimly. "This is not a genuine offer. It's a message that he knows of your importance to our resistance, and to me personally." He glanced at Mircea, who watched the adults with solemn confusion. "It's also a threat." Anna instinctively drew her son closer. "Then we face him directly. No more shadows and raids." "Yes," Eli nodded, a new resolve settling over him. "It seems Dragomir desires war with Ținutul Alb. I intend to give him exactly what he wants, though not in the manner he expects." As they rode south toward the castle, the weight of what awaited them hung heavy in the air. The failed trap, the burning villages, Dragomir's provocative demand, all pointed toward a conflict that could no longer be contained to border skirmishes and midnight raids. True war loomed on the horizon, dark and implacable as the winter clouds gathering above them. The Vale of Ser lay shrouded in morning mist, its steep rocky slopes rising like sentinels from the fog-filled basin. Ancient pines clung to the mountainsides, their dark silhouettes barely visible through the swirling white veil. At the valley's eastern entrance, Anna Daciana stood with Bătrânul Petru, watching as the old man traced weathered fingers over a crudely drawn map. "The old mining tunnels run here," he explained, indicating a series of dotted lines. "Abandoned 20 summers ago when the silver veins ran dry, but the passages remain sound in most places." Anna nodded, committing the details to memory. "And they connect to the western ridge?" "Aye, 3 main exits here, here, and here." Petru jabbed at the parchment. "Used them myself as a young man. The Valsini dogs won't know them. They're not marked on any royal maps." 3 weeks had passed since their return to the castle. 3 weeks of frantic preparation, of council meetings and military planning. Prince Dragomir had responded to Eli's rejection of his peace offer with a full-scale invasion. The first major battle had been devastating, Ținutul Alb's forces outflanked and overwhelmed by Valkini's superior numbers. Now they prepared for what might be their final stand. The Vale of Cer, Anna's desperate gambit, approved by Prince Ili against his counsel's vehement objections. "The prince arrives," Petru murmured, nodding toward the narrow path where a group of riders approached. Ili dismounted with fluid grace that belied his exhaustion. The past weeks had transformed him. Gone was any trace of the sheltered royal. In his place stood a battle-hardened leader, his handsome face leaner, his eyes holding both determination and the shadow of recent defeats. "The Western scouts report Dragomir's forces have taken the bait," he announced without preamble. "They follow our retreating army exactly as planned." Anna's heart quickened. How many? Nearly his full strength. 5,000 men, at least. Their vanguard should reach the valley entrance by midday tomorrow. Ili turned to Petru. "Are your men ready?" The old soldier straightened proudly. 30 former miners, each knowing these tunnels like the lines on their palms. "They await your command." "And the traps?" "Set as the lady instructed," Petru confirmed with a nod toward Anna. Oil barrels positioned, rock slides prepared, hidden pits dug and concealed. Ili's gaze met Anna's, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. This plan, born of her intimate knowledge of the Northern Territories and his military experience, represented their last, desperate hope. "Get some rest," he told Petru. "Tomorrow will test us all." As the old man departed, Ili and Anna walked slowly along the misty ridge, surveying the vale below where tomorrow's battle would unfold. "The council still believes this plan is folly," Ili admitted quietly. "And you?" Anna asked. "Do you share their doubts?" He was silent for a long moment, his profile sharp against the gray sky. "I believe in you," he finally said. "Your instincts have proven true more often than my counselor's careful calculations." The simple statement warmed something in Anna's chest that had been cold since the first villages burned. "Dragomir is arrogant," she said. "He thinks us beaten, scattered. He won't expect a coordinated defense." "Let us hope that arrogance blinds him completely," Ili replied. His hand brushed hers briefly, a touch so light it might have been accidental, yet it sent awareness coursing through her. "There's something I must ask you." Anna turned to face him fully. "Speak plainly." "If tomorrow goes badly," Ili began, his voice low and intense, "you must take Mircea and the other villagers through the secret pass to Moldavia. I've arranged sanctuary for you there." Anger flashed through Anna. "You expect me to flee while others fight?" "I expect you to survive," Ili corrected firmly. "Your son needs his mother. And these people—" He gestured toward the makeshift camp where refugees from the northern villages had gathered. "They look to you when hope seems lost." "They look to their prince," Anna countered. "No." Ili shook his head. "They tolerate their prince because you stand beside him. It's you they trust, Anna. You they follow." Before she could protest further, Captain Dragos approached, his expression grave. "Your Highness, the Valsini prisoner has provided new information. You'll want to hear this." In the command tent, a bound man knelt between two guards, a Valsini soldier captured during a recent skirmish. Blood caked one side of his face, but his eyes remained defiant. "Speak," Ili commanded. "Repeat what you told the captain." The prisoner's lips curved in a malicious smile. "Prince Dragomir knows of your plans. The woman," his eyes flicked to Anna, "and her marsh trap. He knows." Ice formed in Anna's veins. "How?" "You have a traitor in your midst," the prisoner said with obvious satisfaction. "Someone close to your counsels, someone who sends ravens under cover of night." "He lies," Dragos growled, cuffing the man sharply. "Trying to sow discord among us." But Ili held up a hand, studying the prisoner intently. "Continue. What else has this traitor revealed?" "Everything. The mining tunnels, the ambush points, the oil barrels." The soldier's grin widened. "Tomorrow, the Prince of Valsini will crush what remains of your pathetic resistance, and he'll take the woman as his prize, as he vowed." Anna stepped forward, her voice deadly calm. "If Dragomir knows our strategy, why does he still advance? Why not bypass the veil entirely?" The prisoner's eyes narrowed, clearly surprised by the question. Because he doesn't know, Anna concluded, watching the man's face. You're lying. Dragomir sent you to be captured, fed you this story to make us abandon our position. Doubt flickered across the prisoner's features, quickly masked, but not before Ili caught it. He nodded to the guards. Take him away. Keep him under close watch. When they were alone, Ili turned to Anna. How can you be certain? If Dragomir truly knew our plans, he wouldn't want us to know he knows, she explained. He'd want us to proceed, thinking our trap was still secret, only to spring a counter-trap. Ili considered this. Unless that's precisely what he's doing now, making us think he doesn't know, when in fact he does. Then we face the same choice either way, Anna said pragmatically. Proceed with our plan or retreat again with no guarantee of a better position. Darkness had fallen by the time they finished revising their strategy. As a precaution against possible betrayal, Ili had altered key elements of the plan, sharing the changes only with Anna and Captain Dragos. If there was indeed a traitor, they would be feeding Dragomir outdated information. Anna found herself unable to sleep, her mind racing with all that tomorrow might bring. She left her tent quietly, careful not to wake Mircea, who slumbered peacefully, blissfully unaware of the danger they faced. The night air was cold and clear, the mist having temporarily lifted to reveal a canopy of stars. She made her way to a small outcropping that overlooked the valley, surprised to find Ili already there, a solitary figure against the night sky. You should be resting, she said, coming to stand beside him. As should you, he replied, without turning. Yet here we both are. Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable but weighted with unspoken thoughts. Finally, Ili spoke again. I've been thinking of my father. He faced a similar moment during the Carpathian Rebellion, outnumbered, betrayed by allies, forced into a desperate gambit. What did he do? Anna asked. He won, Ili said simply. Not through superior strength or cunning, but because his men believed victory possible, even when logic said otherwise. He turned to face her. Faith can be a powerful weapon, Anna. Faith in what? In something worth fighting for, worth dying for if necessary. His eyes, dark and intense in the starlight, held hers. My father had his kingdom. I have more. The implication hung in the air between them, too fragile to acknowledge directly, yet too powerful to dismiss. Anna found herself taking a step closer, drawn by something beyond reason or caution. Ili, she said, using his name without title for the first time. If tomorrow? He raised a hand gently, his fingers brushing her cheek with impossible tenderness. No. No last confessions. No final words. We will speak of tomorrow, after we have won. The certainty in his voice, not arrogance, but a bone-deep conviction, steadied her as nothing else could have. Anna nodded, covering his hand with her own for a brief electric moment before stepping back. Then you should try to sleep, Your Highness, she said, a hint of her usual practicality returning. A prince who falls from his horse from exhaustion makes a poor inspirational figure. Ili's laugh was soft and genuine. Always the voice of reason. Very well, I shall attempt to rest if you will do the same. Dawn broke with ominous red streaks across the eastern sky. Throughout the Vale of Ser, Ili's forces took their positions, archers concealed among the rocky outcroppings, cavalry hidden in the pine forest flanking the valley, infantry strategically placed to funnel the enemy toward the prepared traps. In the command tent, Anna embraced Mircea one last time before entrusting him to the care of an elderly village woman who would guide the children and infirm to safety if the battle turned against them. Be brave, my heart, she whispered, pressing a kiss to his forehead. Remember what I taught you. I will, Mama, the boy promised solemnly. And when I see you again, I'll have looked after everyone, just like you look after the village. His confidence that they would reunite brought tears to Anna's eyes, but she blinked them away, unwilling to let him see her fear. Outside, mounted on a sturdy bay horse, Ili addressed his assembled captains, his voice carrying clearly in the morning air. Today we fight not just for land or pride, but for our very existence as a free people. Dragomir comes believing us beaten, believing his victory assured. His gaze swept across the gathered faces, lingering briefly on Anna's. Let us show him how dearly that assumption will cost him. As the captains dispersed to their positions, Ili rode to where Anna waited. For a moment, they regarded each other in silence, all that needed saying communicated in that single look. "Until victory," he said finally, raising his hand in salute. Anna returned the gesture, her chin lifted proudly. "Until victory." And with that, they rode to their separate positions, as the distant sound of Valsini war drums began to echo through the vale. The Vale of Cher trembled with the thunder of hooves as Valsini forces poured into the narrow valley entrance. Crimson and black banners snapped in the wind, and sunlight glinted off armor and weaponry. At their head rode a figure in ornate silver plate. Prince Dragomir himself, his presence a testament to his confidence in victory. Hidden among the rocks of the eastern ridge, Anna watched through a brass spyglass, counting battalions and assessing formations. Beside her, 3 village hunters awaited her signal, arrows nocked and ready. "He's brought his entire army," she murmured, more to herself than her companions. Just as we hoped. The Valsini advance continued unchallenged, their vanguard reaching the valley's center where the mist hung thickest over deceptively solid ground. Anna raised her hand, holding the hunters in check despite their evident eagerness. Timing would determine everything. On the opposite ridge, barely visible through the swirling mist, Ilie and his royal guards waited for the same critical moment. Their eyes met across the distance, 2 leaders united in purpose, their silent communication requiring no words or signals. When the last of the Valsini rearguard entered the valley, Ili dropped his arm in a sharp gesture. Instantly, the battle erupted as hidden archers released their first volley. Arrows rained down upon the Valsini forces, creating momentary chaos as the front lines faltered. "Now!" Anna commanded, and her hunters dispatched flaming arrows toward specific targets, oil barrels strategically positioned along the valley floor. Fire erupted in blazing lines, cutting off retreat and dividing the Valsini army into isolated segments. Dragomir's voice carried through the valley as he shouted commands, rallying his men with practiced authority. "Forward, push through. It's a simple ambush, nothing more." But as his cavalry charged ahead, the true nature of the trap revealed itself. The seemingly solid ground gave way beneath the weight of armored horses, becoming a sucking quagmire that immobilized the riders. From concealed positions, Sinutul Alb infantry emerged, engaging the stranded cavalry with deadly precision. Anna descended swiftly from her position, leading a group of miners through hidden paths toward the first of the tunnel entrances. Their task was perhaps the most dangerous, setting explosive charges within the abandoned mine shafts to trigger landslides at crucial points. "Remember," she cautioned as they entered the dark passage, "wait for the second horn blast. Not before, not after." The tunnels were dank and oppressive, supports groaning ominously overhead as they made their way through the ancient workings. Anna moved with confidence born of necessity rather than experience, counting intersections and marking their path with chalk. Above, the battle raged with increasing ferocity. Ili led a cavalry charge down the western ridge, sweeping through a section of Valsini infantry with devastating effect. His sword rose and fell in a deadly arc, his royal armor marked with the dirt and blood of genuine combat. "The prince fights like a man possessed," one soldier remarked to Captain Dragos as they regrouped for another charge. "He fights for more than a crown today," Dragos replied cryptically, his eyes tracking Ili's progress across the battlefield. In the tunnels below, Anna and her miners reached the first designated chamber. Ancient support beams creaked as they positioned their explosive charges, a volatile mixture of black powder and mining compounds. The plan called for synchronized detonations beneath key sections of the valley floor, creating a cascading series of collapses that would devastate the Valsini formations above. "Charge set," announced a grizzled miner named Vasile. "We should move to the next position." As they proceeded deeper into the labyrinth, a distant rumble shook dust from the ceiling. Anna paused, frowning. That wasn't from above. That came from the western tunnel, Vasily exclaimed. Someone's collapsed the passage. Cold realization washed over Anna. The traitor hadn't been bluffing after all. Someone had betrayed their plans to Dragomir, who had sent men to infiltrate the tunnels and cut off their escape. We need to warn the others, Anna decided quickly. Vasily, take 2 men and check the southern exit. I'll continue to the final charge point. My lady, it's too dangerous to split up, the miner protested. If we don't set those charges, everyone above dies, Anna replied firmly. Go, now. As Vasily reluctantly departed with 2 companions, Anna led the remaining miners toward the final chamber. The passage narrowed, forcing them to proceed in single file through sections where the ceiling had partially collapsed. Above, the tide of battle had begun to turn. Though caught in the initial trap, Dragomir's forces were adapting with veteran discipline. Their superior numbers allowed them to absorb losses that would have devastated a smaller army. Ili found himself surrounded by Valsini soldiers, fighting with desperate intensity as his guards struggled to reach him. A lance thrust caught him in the left shoulder, piercing a gap in his armor. Pain flared white-hot, but he fought on, unwilling to yield while his people still battled. Captain Dragos finally broke through the enemy line, creating a path for Ili to rejoin his forces. The tunnels, Your Highness, he shouted over the din of combat. No signal from below. Something's wrong. Ili's heart constricted at the implication. Anna was down there, vulnerable to whatever had gone amiss. Before he could respond, a horn blast echoed across the valley. Not their signal, but a Valsini command. From the eastern ridge, fresh enemy forces appeared, having circled around through paths that should have been guarded. We've been betrayed, Ili realized aloud, blood dripping from his wounded shoulder. Sound the retreat to position 2. In the tunnels, Anna and her remaining miners reached the final chamber, a vast cavern where the main support columns for this section of the valley stood. As they began setting their charges, a noise from the passage behind them froze them in place. Someone comes, whispered a young miner, notching an arrow to his bow. Anna motioned for silence, positioning herself behind a fallen rock column. Footsteps approached, too measured to be their fleeing companions, too confident to be lost allies. 5 Valsini soldiers emerged into the chamber, led by a tall figure whose fine armor marked him as an officer. Search every corner, he commanded. The woman must be here somewhere. Anna signaled to her companions to remain hidden, but the young miner, barely more than a boy, trembled visibly, his bow creaking as he drew back the string. The sound, slight as it was, caught the officer's attention. There, he shouted, and chaos erupted. The miners fought bravely but were outnumbered and outmatched by professional soldiers. Anna struck from concealment, her hunting knife finding gaps in armor with deadly precision, but it wasn't enough. Within moments, her companions lay dead or dying. She backed toward the tunnel entrance, injured but defiant, when a voice stopped her cold. Anna Daciana, the officer said, removing his helmet to reveal sharp features and cold gray eyes. Prince Dragomir will be pleased. He's spoken often of the northern widow who's caused him such trouble. Your prince will find me poor company, Anna replied, scanning her surroundings for any advantage. The officer smiled thinly. Oh, he doesn't desire your company. Merely your head is a gift for Prince Ili. A fitting message between rulers, wouldn't you agree? He advanced slowly, sword raised, when a small figure darted from a side passage, hurling a rock with surprising force. The projectile struck the officer's temple, drawing blood and momentarily distracting him. Mama! Mircea cried, his small face determined despite his evident terror. Horror and disbelief paralyzed Anna for a crucial heartbeat. Mircea, how? She had no time to finish the question. The Valsini soldiers turned toward this new target, and Anna's maternal instinct overrode all tactical consideration. She launched herself forward with a primal cry, knife slashing wildly as she fought to reach her son. The officer recovered quickly, intercepting her charge with brutal efficiency. His sword opened a gash across her ribs, but Anna barely felt the pain, her focus absolute as she struggled to reach Mircea. Run! She screamed to her son. Back through the passage! The boy hesitated, torn between obedience and the desire to help his mother. That hesitation proved costly. A Valsini soldier grabbed him, lifting the struggling child easily. What a touching reunion! The officer mocked, pressing his sword tip to Anna's throat as she was restrained. Now the boy can watch his mother die before joining her. The cold metal bit into Anna's skin, drawing a thin line of blood. She met her son's terrified eyes, trying to convey courage she no longer felt. After everything, the battles, the plans, the hope of victory, to die here in the darkness while her child watched. A thunderous explosion shook the cavern, sending cascades of dust and stone from the ceiling. The officer staggered, momentarily thrown off balance, his sword slipping away from Anna's throat. Through the choking dust emerged a figure in battle-stained royal armor, sword gleaming despite the gloom. Prince Ili Basarab fought with cold fury, each strike precise and devastating. Behind him came Captain Dragos and a squad of royal guards engaging the remaining Valsini soldiers. The officer recovered quickly, turning to face this new threat with practiced skill. The prince himself, he sneered. Dragomir will reward me handsomely for your head. Their blades met in a shower of sparks, the sound of steel on steel echoing through the cavern. Ili fought with one arm partially immobilized by his earlier wound, but what he lacked in strength he made up for in desperate intensity. Anna wrenched free from her distracted captor, driving her knife into his throat before lunging toward Mircea. The soldier holding him backed away, using the child as a shield. "Stay back," he warned, pressing a dagger to the boy's throat. Mircea's eyes were wide with terror, but in them Anna saw a flash of his father's courage. With a sudden movement, the boy bit down hard on his captor's hand. The soldier cursed, his grip loosening just enough for Mircea to squirm free. Anna didn't hesitate. Her knife found the soldier's heart as Mircea ran to her arms. Across the cavern, Ili and the Valseni officer fought with increasing desperation. Though skilled, the officer began to flag against Ili's relentless assault. With a final devastating combination, Ili drove his sword through his opponent's guard and into his chest. As the last Valseni soldier fell, an ominous creaking echoed through the chamber. The explosions and fighting had weakened the ancient supports. "The tunnel's collapsing," Captain Dragos shouted. "We must leave now." Ilia rushed to where Anna clutched Mircea, his eyes quickly assessing her injuries. "Can you walk?" "Yes," she managed, though pain lanced through her side with each breath. "The charges, they're not all set." "There's no time," Ili decided, helping her to her feet while Captain Dragos lifted Mircea. "The western tunnel is already gone. We'll take the eastern escape route." They fled through the darkened passages as the mountains seemed to groan around them. Twice they were forced to detour when passages collapsed ahead. Behind them, the main chamber caved in with a sound like distant thunder. When they finally emerged into daylight on the eastern slope, the battle in the valley had shifted dramatically. Without the planned tunnel collapses, the trap had been only partially successful. Valseni forces were regrouping, preparing for a renewed assault against Ili's dwindling troops. "We can't win this fight," Anna realized, clutching her bleeding side as she surveyed the battlefield. "Not today. Not like this." Ili's face was grim as he reached the same conclusion. The betrayal had cost them their advantage, and now the price would be paid in blood unless he acted. "Sound the full retreat," he ordered Captain Dragos. "We fall back to the mountain passes." As the captain departed to relay the command, Ili turned to Anna and Mircea, his expression softening despite the defeat weighing on him. "I thought I'd lost you both," he said quietly. Anna's hand found his, their fingers intertwining briefly. "Not yet, Your Highness. Not while we still breathe." Winter descended upon Sinutal Alb with merciless intensity. Snow blanketed the mountain passes, and bitter winds howled through villages half-emptied by war and famine. In the great hall of the royal castle, a somber council convened around a massive oak table, where maps and reports painted a grim picture of the kingdom's state. Prince Ili stood at the head of the table, his left arm still bound in a sling from the wound received at the Vale of Ser. Though physically healing, the defeat had left other, less visible scars. His face was leaner, his eyes harder, a ruler tempered by failure and betrayal. Dragomir's forces hold the entire northern province, Captain Dragos reported, indicating the shaded areas on the map. They've established garrisons in 3 major villages and fortified the passes leading to the central plains. Lord Coston, one of the few council members Ely still trusted, shook his head gravely. Our grain stores will last until early spring at best. After that, he left the implication hanging in the air. Starvation would accomplish what Dragomir's sword had not. "What of Moldavia?" Ely asked. "Have they responded to our request for alliance?" "Their envoy arrived this morning, Your Highness," replied the court chamberlain. "They offer condolences for our situation, but no military support." A murmur of dismay rippled through the council. Without Moldavian aid, Tinutul Alb stood alone against the Valcini aggression. "Condolences," Elia repeated, his voice dangerously soft. "How generous of them." At the far end of the table, apart from the noble councillors, Anna Daciana sat in uncharacteristic silence. The weeks since their retreat from the Vale of Cher had changed her as well. The wound to her side had healed poorly, leaving her with a persistent pain that she disguised with practiced stoicism. But it was the betrayal, the knowledge that someone close to them had deliberately endangered her child, that had left the deepest mark. "What of the traitor?" she finally asked, her question cutting through the council's murmurs. "Have we identified who betrayed our plans to Dragomir?" The council chamber grew uncomfortably quiet. The investigation had yielded suspicions but no certainty, a situation that left everyone under a cloud of doubt. "3 possibilities remain," Captain Dragos answered. "Lord Mihnea, who opposed our strategy from the beginning. Chamberlain Radu, who had access to all our communications, and—" He hesitated, his loyalty visibly at war with his duty to report. "And myself," Lord Coston finished for him, his aged face lined with dignified pain, "as I had argued for diplomatic solutions with Valcini in the past." Ely studied his most trusted advisor, searching for any sign of duplicity. "You've served my family for 30 years, Lord Coston. I find it difficult to believe you would betray us now." "As do I, Your Highness," the old nobleman replied. "Yet the evidence must be followed wherever it leads." The uncomfortable discussion was interrupted by the arrival of a messenger, Snow still clinging to his cloak as he knelt before the prince. "Your Highness, riders approach from the north. They bear a white flag of parley and claim to come directly from Prince Dragomir." A tense silence fell over the chamber. After a moment's consideration, Ely nodded. "Bring them to the antechamber. Captain Dragos, select a guard of your most trusted men." As the council dispersed to prepare for the unexpected envoy, Anna approached Ely, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "It's a trap," she warned. "Dragomir would never seek honest parley." "Perhaps," Ely acknowledged, "but I must hear what he offers nonetheless." He studied her face, noting the shadows beneath her eyes. "How is Mircea?" Anna's expression softened slightly at the mention of her son. "Recovering. The nightmares come less frequently now." She hesitated. "He asks for you. He says the prince promised to teach him swordplay when his shoulder healed." A ghost of a smile touched Ely's lips. "And so I shall when this is over." He paused, then added more solemnly, "One way or another, this war ends soon, Anna. We cannot endure another season of it." In the antechamber, Prince Dragomir's envoy waited. A tall, imposing man with a neatly trimmed beard and the cold eyes of a predator. He bowed with precise formality as Ely entered. "Your Highness, I am Baron Radu Lupescu, voice of the glorious Prince Dragomir of Valcani." His gaze flickered to Anna as she entered behind Ely, and a thin smile curved his lips. "And the famous Anna Daciana. Your reputation precedes you, my lady." "Speak your piece, Baron," Ely commanded, ignoring the man's attempt to unsettle them. "Why does your prince sue for parley after months of open warfare?" Baron Lupescu spread his hands in a gesture of reasonable diplomacy. "War is costly for all sides, Your Highness. Prince Dragomir believes a more permanent solution might be reached without further bloodshed." "What solution does he propose?" Elia asked, his voice betraying nothing of his thoughts. "A simple one." The Baron produced a sealed parchment bearing Dragomir's crest. Prince Dragomir will withdraw all forces from Tinutul Alb soil and recognize your sovereignty over these lands, with one small exception. The northern villages, Anna guessed, her tone flat. Indeed. Lupescu nodded approvingly. The lady is as perceptive as they say. The disputed territories north of the Chair Mountains would become a protectorate of Valcini. A small price for lasting peace, wouldn't you agree? Ili's face remained impassive. And the people of those villages? What of them? They would be permitted to remain, of course, under Valcini protection and taxation. The Baron's smile didn't reach his eyes. Those who prefer Tinutul Alb rule would be allowed 3 months to relocate southward, abandoning homes their families have held for generations, Anna noted bitterly. Baron Lupescu turned his cold gaze upon her. War creates refugees, my lady. Better a controlled relocation than further bloodshed, no? He returned his attention to Ili. There is one additional condition. Prince Dragomir requires a gesture of good faith, proof that Tinutul Alb truly desires peace. What gesture? Ili asked, though something in his expression suggested he already anticipated the answer. The Northern Widow, Lupescu stated simply, nodding toward Anna. Prince Dragomir has developed a particular interest in the woman who has thwarted him so effectively. He requests her presence at his court as a royal hostage to ensure compliance with the treaty terms. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. Captain Dragosh's hand moved instinctively to his sword hilt, but Ili's subtle gesture held him in check. You ask me to surrender both our northern territories and a citizen of my realm to your master's dubious mercy. Ili summarized, his voice dangerously quiet. What do we receive in exchange beyond vague promises of peace? The Baron's confidence never wavered. Your kingdom's survival, your highness. Make no mistake. Spring will bring the full might of Valcini against you, with or without Moldavian support. This offer allows Tinutul Alb to remain independent, if diminished. Ilia's expression revealed nothing as he considered the proposal. I require time to consult my council on these terms. Of course, Baron Lupescu agreed smoothly. Prince Dragomir grants you 3 days to consider. I shall await your answer here, as his representative. After the Baron was escorted to guest quarters under heavy guard, Ili retreated to his private study with Anna and Captain Dragos. The moment the door closed, his carefully maintained composure gave way to cold fury. Dragomir overreaches, he declared, pacing before the fireplace. To demand our northern territories was expected, but to ask for Anna as well. He fears me, Anna interrupted, her voice steady despite the implications of Dragomir's request. Or rather, he fears what I represent. The northern villages look to me, not to royal authority. By removing me, he eliminates a potential rallying point for resistance. Captain Dragos nodded grimly. It's a shrewd move. The lady has become a symbol to the common folk, proof that one can stand against Valcini tyranny and survive. I won't consider it, Ilia stated flatly. Neither the territorial concession nor the personal demand. Anna studied him thoughtfully. Perhaps you should. Both men turned to her in surprise. You can't possibly suggest, Ili began. I suggest we use Dragomir's arrogance against him, Anna clarified. He believes he's won. He believes we're desperate. Let him continue thinking so while we prepare a final counterstrike. What kind of counterstrike can we mount with our forces depleted and winter upon us? Captain Dragos asked skeptically. A grim smile touched Anna's lips. The kind that requires neither armies nor favorable weather. The kind he would never expect from Honorable Prince Ili Basarab. Understanding dawned in Ili's eyes. Assassination. Justice, Anna corrected. For Lunca Bradului. For all the villages burned and lives destroyed. Ili shook his head slowly. It would require someone to infiltrate his court, gain proximity. Someone he specifically requested, Anna finished. Someone he believes poses no threat once separated from her supporters. No. Ili's response was immediate and firm. I won't send you into his hands. The risk is too great. The risk of doing nothing is greater, Anna countered. With Dragomir eliminated, his coalition would fragment. The noble houses of Valseni have no love for each other. They unite only under his forceful rule. Captain Dragos stroked his beard thoughtfully. The lady's assessment is accurate, Your Highness. Valseni unity is personified in Dragomir himself. Without him, we might negotiate with individual houses for a more favorable peace, Ilie concluded. But the personal danger to Anna is mine to accept or reject, she interrupted firmly. I faced his soldiers before. I can face the prince himself. Later that evening, after the castle had grown quiet, Ilie sought Anna in the small garden courtyard, where she often walked when sleep proved elusive. He found her standing beneath a snow-laden arbor, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. You should be resting, he said softly, approaching. Your wound heals slowly, Anna completed for him, as do all wounds worth noting. She turned to face him, moonlight illuminating the determination in her features. Have you reconsidered my proposal? Ilie's expression was troubled. I've thought of little else. The strategic merits are clear, but what? The cost is too high, he admitted. Dragomir is cruel and cunning. If he suspected your true purpose, or if the attempt failed. Anna's gaze was steady. Every day we delay, our position weakens. Food grows scarcer. Moldavia watches to see which side emerges victorious before committing. We cannot win a conventional war against him now. I know. Ilie stepped closer, close enough that she could see the conflict in his eyes. But I cannot send you, of all people, into such danger. Why? Anna challenged. Because I'm a woman? Because I'm common-born? Because you matter, Ilie replied simply. To your son, to your people. He hesitated, then added more quietly. To me. The admission hung between them, neither able to retreat from its implications. Anna's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Then trust me to return, she said. Trust me to succeed where armies have failed. Ilie gazed at her for a long moment, seeing beyond the practical village widow to the extraordinary woman beneath, fierce, intelligent, unbreakable. Finally, he nodded slowly. We have 3 days before Lupescu requires an answer, he said. 3 days to prepare you for what may be the most dangerous mission of this war. And to identify our traitor, Anna added grimly. For this plan to succeed, we must know who carries our secrets to Dragomir. As they stood together in the quiet garden, snow beginning to fall around them, the weight of what they contemplated settled between them, a desperate gambit born of winter and defeat, with the fate of a kingdom hanging in the balance. The castle chapel stood silent and solemn in the pre-dawn light. Ancient stone walls, weathered by centuries of prayer and politics, enclosed a space where generations of Tsinutulalb's rulers had sought divine guidance before momentous decisions. Now, Prince Ilie knelt alone before the simple altar, his head bowed, his thoughts tumultuous. The door creaked softly, admitting a cloaked figure who approached with measured steps. Anna paused at a respectful distance, waiting until Ilie acknowledged her presence. I didn't expect to find you here, she said quietly when he finally looked up. Nor did I expect to find myself here, Ilie admitted, rising to his feet. My father was a devout man. He claimed to find clarity in prayer before difficult choices. A rueful smile touched his lips. I've never possessed his faith, but today I find myself reaching for any wisdom available. Anna studied him in the dim light, noting the shadows beneath his eyes that spoke of a sleepless night. And did you find it? Clarity? No, Ilie sighed. Only more questions. 3 days had passed since Baron Lupescu's arrival. 3 days of meticulous planning, of secrets shared only between Ilie, Anna, and Captain Dragos. Now the moment of decision loomed before them, inescapable as the dawn breaking beyond the chapel windows. Is everything prepared? Ilie asked. Anna nodded, her expression betraying nothing of her inner turmoil. The council convenes at midday to hear your formal response to Dragomir's terms. Mircea has been entrusted to Batranul Petru, who will keep him safe regardless of what unfolds. She hesitated, then added more softly, I spoke with him last night, explained that I might be away for some time. How did he take it? as a child of war takes all things, with more understanding than he should possess at his age. Anna's voice caught slightly. He asked if I was going to make the bad prince go away, so that you could teach him swordplay as promised. Ely closed his eyes briefly, the innocent question piercing his carefully maintained composure. And what did you tell him? That I would do everything in my power to make it so. Anna's chin lifted, the familiar determination returning to her gaze. And I will, Ely. I will return. The use of his name without title, still rare enough to catch his attention, spoke volumes about the distance they had traveled together since that first encounter in the forest clearing. There's still time to reconsider, Ely said, though they both knew the words were merely ceremonial at this point. The plan was set, the pieces in motion. No, Anna replied simply. There isn't. Later that morning, an unexpected discovery shook the carefully constructed strategy. Captain Dragos burst into Ely's private study, his weathered face grim with purpose. "We've found him," he announced without preamble. The traitor. Ely rose from his desk, where maps and documents had been hastily concealed at the captain's entrance. "You're certain?" "Beyond doubt. It was Chamberlain Radu." The guard caught him dispatching a raven at dawn, carrying a message detailing our council's internal debates about Dragomir's offer. Anna, who had been reviewing the floor plans of Valcini's royal palace, set aside the parchment with deliberate calm. "Has he confessed?" "Fully," Dragos confirmed. Once confronted with evidence, he broke quickly. "He's been Dragomir's informant for nearly a year, feeding information about our defenses, our resources, our plans." "What was his price?" Ely asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Gold initially, then promises of a lordship in the new order once Valcini conquered us." Dragos's disgust was evident. He claims Dragomir approached him directly during the peace talks last spring, recognized his resentment at being passed over for higher office. Ely's hand curled into a fist upon the desk. "And because of his ambition, how many have died? How many villages burned?" "He awaits your judgment in the dungeon, Your Highness." "Let him wait," Ely decided after a moment. His fate can be decided after more pressing matters are resolved. He turned to Anna. "This changes our situation. Without their informant, Dragomir will be less certain of our intentions." "Or more suspicious," Anna countered. "If his source suddenly falls silent, he may anticipate some counter-move." Captain Dragos nodded in agreement. "We should proceed as planned. Let the Chamberlain's capture work to our advantage. Dragomir will be expecting information that never arrives." The midday council meeting proceeded with somber ceremony. The great hall was filled to capacity, with nobles and military commanders gathered to witness Prince Ely's formal response to Valcini's terms. Baron Lupescu stood at the center of the chamber, his aristocratic features set in an expression of diplomatic patience. Ely entered last, dressed in full royal regalia, his bearing regal despite the lingering effects of his wound. Anna accompanied him, her simple dress a stark contrast to the finery surrounding her, yet somehow more dignified for its plainness. "Baron Lupescu," Ely began, his voice carrying throughout the hall, "I have consulted with my advisors regarding Prince Dragomir's generous offer." A murmur rippled through the assembly at the unexpected adjective. Most had anticipated an outright rejection of terms they considered humiliating. "After careful consideration, I have decided to accept the proposed territorial concessions," Ely continued, triggering louder exclamations of surprise and dismay from his council. He raised a hand, silencing them. "The northern territories beyond the Tyr Mountains will become a Valcini protectorate, with safe passage guaranteed for any residents wishing to relocate southward." Baron Lupescu's smile was thin and satisfied. "A wise decision, Your Highness. And the other condition?" All eyes turned to Anna, who stood impassive beside the throne, her expression revealing nothing of her thoughts. "Lady Anna Daciana has consented to accompany you to Valcini as a gesture of good faith," Ely stated, and the hall erupted in shocked outcry. Lords who had previously dismissed Anna as an irrelevant commoner now rose in protest at her surrender. "Silence!" Ely commanded, his voice cutting through the tumult. This decision was not made lightly, nor without Lady Anna's full consent. When order was restored, Baron Lupescu bowed deeply. Prince Dragomir will be most gratified by your acceptance, Your Highness. We shall depart tomorrow at dawn, if that arrangement suits. It does, Ili confirmed. Captain Dragos will escort Lady Anna to the border personally with an honor guard befitting her status. As the formalities concluded and the assembly dispersed in confused murmurs, Lord Coston approached the throne, his aged face lined with concern. Your Highness, he said quietly, forgive my presumption, but this is most unlike you. To surrender territory is one thing, but to send this woman, who has proven her worth to our kingdom repeatedly, into Dragomir's hands. Do you question my judgment, Lord Coston? Ili asked, a dangerous edge to his voice. The old nobleman hesitated, then bowed his head. Never your judgment, my prince. Only the circumstances that have forced such a painful choice. Later, in the privacy of Ili's study, the pretense was abandoned. Anna, Ili, and Captain Dragos gathered around a detailed map of the Valsini capital, finalizing the most dangerous aspects of their plan. Dragomir will be cautious at first, Anna reasoned. He'll keep me under guard, limited in movement, while he determines whether I pose any threat. How long before you can gain access to him? Dragos asked. A week, perhaps 2. He'll want to demonstrate his power, humiliate me publicly to break any lingering loyalty to Ținutul Alb. Anna's voice was clinical, detached, as though discussing a stranger's fate rather than her own. Eventually, curiosity will overcome caution. He'll want to understand how a common widow managed to thwart him for so long. And when he does? Ili prompted, though they had rehearsed this scenario multiple times. Anna touched the small leather pouch concealed beneath her bodice. The monk's tincture works slowly but inevitably. Once administered, it leaves no trace, mimicking the wasting fever. 3 drops in wine or food is sufficient. Captain Dragos nodded approvingly. The symptoms appear natural. Even court physicians will find nothing suspicious. And while Valsini's nobles squabble over succession, you return to us under the confusion, Ili concluded. The treaty becomes unenforceable with Dragomir's death, allowing us to reclaim the northern territories while they're distracted by internal politics. The strategy was sound, the planning meticulous. Yet as night fell and the moment of separation approached, the human cost of their gambit weighed increasingly upon them all. Ili found Anna in the castle gardens, saying a private goodbye to Mircea. The boy clung to his mother with desperate intensity, his small face buried against her shoulder. As Ili approached, Mircea looked up, tears streaking his cheeks. Prince Ili, the child said with surprising formality, you must promise to protect Mama. She says she can protect herself, but Papa said the same thing and he never came home. The simple statement, delivered with a child's brutal honesty, struck Ili like a physical blow. He knelt before the boy, meeting his gaze at eye level. Mircea, he said solemnly, I swear to you on my honor as Prince of Ținutul Alb that I will do everything in my power to bring your mother home safely. The boy studied him with those amber eyes so like Anna's, intelligent, assessing, seeing more than a child should. Finally he nodded, accepting the oath. Patronul Petru is waiting for you by the kitchen gardens, Anna told her son softly. Go with him now. Be brave for me. After one final fierce embrace, Mircea obeyed, though he looked back several times before disappearing around the garden wall. When he was gone, Anna turned to Ili, her composure finally cracking to reveal the fear beneath. If I don't return, she began. You will, Ili interrupted firmly. If I don't, she insisted, promise me he'll be cared for. Not as a charity case or a political pawn, but as a child with his own destiny. I promise, Ili said, then added more softly, though I would rather promise to raise him alongside you. The words hung between them, laden with meaning. Neither had fully articulated until this moment of imminent separation. Anna's eyes widened slightly, searching his face for confirmation of what she'd heard. Ili, I should have spoken sooner, he admitted. Before war and necessity complicated everything. Before sending you into danger became our only option. He took her hand, his touch gentle despite the calluses earned in battle. When you return, and you will return, Ana Daciana, we will speak of the future, of what might be possible between a prince and a village widow who saved his kingdom. A sad smile touched Anna's lips. You speak as though such a future could exist, as though the nobles who barely tolerate my presence in council would accept me as anything more. They will accept what their prince decrees, Ilia replied with quiet certainty. And if they cannot... He shrugged, a surprisingly casual gesture from the normally formal ruler. Perhaps it's time Tinutul Alb remembered that crowns exist to serve the people, not the other way around. For a brief moment, the barriers between them, of rank, of circumstance, of impending separation, seemed to dissolve. Anna leaned forward, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that contained both promise and farewell. When I return, she whispered against his mouth, hold me to that future. Dawn arrived with a bitter chill, the eastern sky streaked with crimson that seemed an ill omen for the day ahead. In the castle courtyard, Baron Lupescu waited with his Valkynie escort, his satisfaction poorly disguised as diplomatic courtesy. Anna appeared dressed for travel, a fur-lined cloak wrapped around her slender form. She had discarded any trappings that might identify her as anything but what she truly was, a village woman of quiet dignity, neither cowed by circumstance nor pretending to nobility she didn't possess. As final preparations were made, Ilia approached her one last time. For the benefit of watching eyes, their exchange was formal, a prince bidding farewell to a subject making a noble sacrifice. But their eyes spoke volumes that no observer could interpret. "Safe journey, Lady Anna," Ilia said, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "Know that Tinutul Alb honors your courage." "I go willingly, Your Highness," she replied clearly. "For peace." As she mounted the horse provided for her journey, Anna cast one final glance at the castle that had become an unexpected home. Somewhere within its walls, her son waited, protected by loyal friends. And beside her, watching with carefully controlled emotion, stood the prince who had promised a future she scarcely dared imagine. With a slight nod, part farewell, part promise, Anna turned her horse toward the castle gates and the dangerous road that lay beyond. Spring arrived in Tinutul Alb with a gentleness that belied the harsh winter preceding it. Meadows that had lain dormant under snow now erupted in vibrant wildflowers, and birdsong filled forests recently silent save for the howling of wolves. In village squares throughout the kingdom, the season's first markets bustled with an energy long absent. Hope, cautious but unmistakable, had returned to the land. In the royal castle's great hall, Prince Ilia stood before an assembled crowd unlike any in the kingdom's history. Nobles in fine attire stood shoulder to shoulder with village elders in their humble best. Royal guards mingled with hunters and farmers who had taken up arms during the darkest days of the Valtini War. All had gathered for an announcement that had been the subject of speculation for weeks. "For generations," Ilia began, his voice carrying to the farthest corners of the hall, "Tinutul Alb has been ruled by tradition, by bloodlines and ancient customs that separated prince from people. The war with Valsini taught us the cost of such separation." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the diverse gathering. In the front row, Mircea stood beside Batranul Petru, the boy's solemn face lifted attentively toward the prince. "When word reached us 2 months ago of Prince Dragomir's sudden illness and death, many counseled immediate military action to reclaim our northern territories. Instead, we chose a different path, one of negotiation from strength rather than vengeance." A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. The diplomatic victories that had followed Dragomir's unexpected demise had been remarkable. With Valsini's noble houses divided over succession, Ilia had secured not only the return of the disputed northern lands but also reparations for the villages destroyed during the conflict. "Today marks the formal end of hostilities," Ilia continued. "Representatives from each of Valsini's great houses have signed a peace treaty that will ensure stability for generations to come." Polite applause followed this announcement, though it was clear from the expectant faces that the assembled crowd anticipated something more significant than a peace declaration. Lord Costan stepped forward, carrying a velvet cushion upon which rested a simple silver circlet. traditional symbol of Tinutul Alb's royal consort. The elderly nobleman's eyes twinkled with uncharacteristic mischief as whispers erupted throughout the hall. "But peace alone is not why I've called you here today," Ely confirmed, a smile warming his usually reserved features. "For alongside treaties and borders, we must also look to the future of our royal house." The great doors at the rear of the hall swung open, and a collective gasp rose from the assembly. Anna Daciana entered, escorted by Captain Dragos. She wore a dress of deep blue silk, simple by royal standards yet elegant in its restraint. Her dark hair was adorned with small white flowers rather than jewels, and she walked with the quiet confidence that had become her hallmark. Mircea broke away from Bătrânul Petru, running to meet his mother halfway down the aisle. Anna knelt to embrace him, heedless of ceremony, before continuing her procession toward the throne with her son's hand firmly clasped in hers. As she reached Ely, he descended the steps to meet her as an equal, rather than requiring her to approach the throne as a subject. The significance of this gesture was not lost on the watching nobles, some of whom shifted uncomfortably at such a visible disruption of protocol. "Anna Daciana," Ely addressed her formally, though his eyes held a warmth reserved only for her. "You have served Tinutul Alb with courage beyond measure and wisdom beyond rank. You have sacrificed for our people when others counseled surrender." The room had fallen completely silent, every ear straining to catch his words. "The northern villages call you their guardian. The common folk sing ballads of the widow who brought a tyrant low. But to me," his voice softened, "to me you are the woman who taught a prince to see beyond castle walls, to understand that true leadership is measured not in gold or titles, but in service to those who have least." Anna's composure remained steady, though those closest could see the emotion shimmering in her amber eyes. "3 months ago, you undertook the most dangerous mission of our war, traveling to Valkeni as a supposed hostage, while carrying the means to end Dragomir's tyranny once and for all." Ely's acknowledgement of what had previously been a closely guarded secret sent shockwaves through the assembly. "Your success secured not only our kingdom's future, but possibly your own death if discovery had come." Anna finally spoke, her voice clear and unwavering. "I did only what was necessary, Your Highness, as did many others who sacrificed for Tinutul Alb." "Perhaps," Ilia conceded with a small smile. "But it is not only for your courage that I stand before you today." He turned to face the assembled crowd directly. "During our darkest hour, I made a promise, first to myself and later to Anna, that should we both survive, I would break with tradition in a way that might scandalize some, but which honors the true spirit of our kingdom." Lord Costin stepped forward, offering the silver circlet to Ely with a formal bow. The prince accepted it, holding it before him like an offering. "Anna Daciana of Kurtza village," Ely said, his voice carrying the formal weight of royal decree, "I ask you now, before all these witnesses, will you consent to be my wife and queen? Not as a political arrangement or for advantage of alliance, but as my equal partner in both heart and governance?" A collective intake of breath swept through the hall. Though rumors had circulated, few had truly believed the prince would choose a commoner as his queen, regardless of her wartime contributions. Anna's gaze never wavered from Ely's. "Your council may not approve such a match, Your Highness." "My council serves Tinutul Alb," Ely replied firmly, "and I can think of no one who has served her with greater devotion than you." A moment of silence stretched between them, weighted with possibility. Then, with simple dignity, Anna nodded. "Yes, Ely Basarab, I will be your wife and queen, not for the crown you offer, but for the heart that comes with it." Mircea, who had been watching this exchange with solemn attention, suddenly broke into a radiant smile. "Does this mean you'll be my father now?" he asked Ely with a child's directness. Laughter rippled through the hall, breaking the formal tension. Ely knelt to the boy's level, his expression serious despite the levity around them. "If you would have me as such, Mircea, nothing would honor me more." The ceremony that followed blended royal tradition with elements from village custom. When the silver circlet was placed upon Anna's head, she knelt not only before Ely but turned to acknowledge the assembled people as well. a silent promise that she would never forget her origins or the common folk she had always championed. As spring twilight fell over the castle, the celebrations continued in the courtyard. Tables had been set up where nobles and commoners feasted together, many of the ancient barriers of class temporarily dissolved in the shared joy of peace and new beginnings. Anna found a moment of quiet on a stone balcony overlooking the festivities. Ely joined her there, 2 goblets of wine in hand. "Having second thoughts, my queen?" he asked softly, offering her one of the goblets. "Not about you," Anna replied honestly, accepting the wine, "but about them." She nodded toward the courtyard below. "Many of your nobles still see me as an interloper, a commoner who rose above her station through extraordinary circumstances." "Let them see what they will," Ely said, his shoulder brushing against hers as he joined her at the balustrade. "Time will prove your worth far better than any argument I could make." Anna sipped her wine thoughtfully. "And what of the northern villages? They've suffered most in this war. They need more than celebrations and promises." "Already addressed?" Ely assured her. "The reparations from Valsini will be directed primarily to rebuilding the devastated regions, and I've appointed Batrinul Petru as the new northern magistrate, a position with real authority, answerable directly to the crown." A genuine smile spread across Anna's face. "The old soldier will be perfect. He knows every family, every need." "The appointment was your son's suggestion, actually," Ely revealed with evident pride. "He said Petru was the only one who could tell when people were lying about what they really needed." The mention of Mircea brought a maternal softness to Anna's expression. "Where is he?" "I lost track of him in the celebrations. Last I saw, Captain Dragos was showing him how to hold a practice sword properly." Ely's eyes twinkled. "I believe I have competition for the boy's admiration." Anna turned to face him fully, her expression suddenly serious. "Thank you for loving him, for seeing him as more than just an attachment to me." "He is remarkable in his own right," Ely replied sincerely. "Much like his mother." A comfortable silence fell between them as they watched the celebrations below. Lanterns were being lit throughout the courtyard as darkness deepened, their golden light reflecting in Anna's eyes when she finally spoke again. "When you found me in that forest clearing fighting those Valsini soldiers," she began hesitantly, "you said later that you recognized me from visions you'd had for years." Ely nodded. "I did. I never told you," Anna continued, her voice softening, "that in the days after Radu died, when grief and fear threatened to overwhelm me, I had dreams of a man I'd never met. Someone who would stand beside me when all seemed lost." Her fingers interlaced with his on the stone balustrade. "I dismissed them as the desperate fantasies of a widow with a young child, seeking comfort where none existed. And now?" Elia asked, his thumb gently caressing the back of her hand. Anna's smile held a certainty that had been hard-won through struggle and loss. "Now I believe there are mysteries in this world beyond our understanding, that perhaps some souls are meant to find each other, even across the divides of rank and circumstance." From the courtyard below, music began, not the formal court compositions usually played at royal functions, but a lively folk melody that had originated in the northern villages. Soon dancers formed circles, nobles somewhat awkwardly learning steps that came naturally to their village counterparts. "Shall we join them, Your Highness?" Anna asked, a playful light entering her eyes. "Or is dancing beneath your royal dignity?" "I fear I may disappoint you," Ely admitted with mock gravity. "My tutors always despaired of my dancing." "Then it's fortunate you married a village woman," Anna replied, tugging him toward the stairs. "We value enthusiasm far above skill." As they descended to join their people, nobles and commoners alike now united under their rule. The winter's hardships seemed to recede like a distant memory. Sinutul Alb had emerged from its darkest hour, not merely intact, but transformed, its ancient hierarchies beginning to dissolve in favor of new possibilities. And at its center stood an unlikely pair, a prince who had learned to see beyond castle walls and a village widow who had never surrendered to fear or tyranny. Together, they would build something neither tradition nor conquest could destroy, a kingdom where courage and compassion outweighed the accidents of birth, and where even the most humble voice deserved to be heard. As the spring stars appeared overhead and the celebration continued into the night, they danced, the prince and his common-born queen, while around them, a new era for Zinutul Alb had already begun.